When Daniel Okafor married Amara, he believed he was doing her a favor. She had walked into his life quietly, soft-spoken, graceful, almost too humble for the luxury circle he had built around himself. Daniel was a self-made real estate developer in Lagos, a man who loved hearing his own success story repeated at dinner tables. He often told people, "I built everything from nothing." What he never realized was that the woman sitting beside him at those tables had built empires he had never even heard of. Amara never corrected him. She never boasted, never interrupted, never mentioned the offshore holdings, never mentioned the energy conglomerates, never mentioned the $40 billion quietly sitting in trusts, global portfolios, and private equity networks stretching from Dubai to Singapore. To Daniel, she was simply his wife. To the world's elite financial circle, she was the silent titan. But Daniel never read financial journals. He read headlines about himself. And that was his first mistake. The marriage had started beautifully. Daniel loved how Amara listened, loved how she admired him, loved how she made him feel powerful. But admiration turned into expectation. Expectation turned into control, and control turned into humiliation. When Daniel's real estate business started slowing down, not failing, but plateauing, his ego couldn't handle it. Investors were asking tougher questions. Banks were tightening approvals. Competitors were rising. And Daniel began to feel small. Small men do dangerous things when they feel small. That's when Vanessa arrived. Vanessa didn't just admire Daniel. She worshipped him. She laughed louder at his jokes, posted him on social media, called him king, whispered in his ear during events, made him feel like a billionaire, even though he wasn't. And slowly, she replaced Amara's quiet presence with loud validation. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening. Daniel walked into the master bedroom, loosening his tie, irritation all over his face. "Vanessa will be staying here for a while," he said casually, not looking at Amara. She blinked once, calm, still. "For how long?" she asked softly. "As long as I decide." There was no argument, no tears, no shouting, just silence. Then he added the sentence that would define his future. "You can move your things to the guest house. I need peace. And honestly, I need a woman who understands ambition." Amara stared at him. He mistook her composure for weakness. What he didn't know was that the master bedroom he was claiming, the mansion, the land it stood on, it was purchased through a holding company she owned. In full. The guest house was small compared to the mansion, but still luxurious by normal standards. Marble floors, ocean view, private balcony. But that wasn't the point. The point was humiliation. Daniel wanted her to feel replaced. Vanessa wasted no time redecorating the master suite. New silk sheets, new perfume in the air, new wardrobe space. And every morning, Amara would walk past them at breakfast. Vanessa in Daniel's robe, Daniel laughing loudly, public affection deliberately exaggerated. They wanted a reaction. They never got one. Amara simply smiled politely and continued making quiet phone calls. At first, Daniel didn't notice. He was too busy hosting parties, too busy proving to the world that he was thriving, too busy showing off Vanessa. But slowly, contracts that had been almost signed started falling through. Major investors suddenly pulled out. Bank approvals stalled. An international expansion deal vanished overnight. Daniel blamed the market, blamed the economy, blamed jealous competitors. He never blamed coincidence. He never considered the possibility that the woman sleeping in the guest house had just ended 3 strategic partnerships with a single instruction. She never attacked him directly. She simply withdrew protection. You see, Daniel's success had not been luck. It had been quietly shielded by her. Vanessa wasn't satisfied with just the bedroom. She wanted dominance. One afternoon, she walked into the guest house unannounced. "You're very calm for someone who lost her husband," she said, smirking. Amara looked up from her laptop. "I haven't lost anything," she replied gently. Vanessa laughed. "You're sleeping in a guest house." Amara closed her laptop slowly. "And you're living in someone else's home." Vanessa didn't understand the sentence, but she would very soon. 3 months later, Daniel's company faced a liquidity crisis. Payroll delays, investor pressure, media whispers, the same magazines that once called him. The next billionaire now questioned his leadership. He stormed into the guest house one night. "This is stress. This is business. You wouldn't understand." Amara stood calmly. "Do you want help?" she asked softly. The audacity! Help! From her! He laughed in her face. "You? Help me? With what? Cooking?" That laugh would haunt him for the rest of his life. Because the next morning, Daniel would receive an email invitation to a global economic summit in Dubai. A summit he had been trying to access for 5 years. He assumed it was his breakthrough. He assumed the world had finally recognized him. He had no idea the keynote speaker was his wife. Daniel did not sleep the night before his flight, not because he was nervous, because he was excited. An invitation-only global infrastructure and energy summit in Dubai. Billionaires, sovereign fund executives, oil magnates, tech giants, the kind of room that creates kings. And finally, he had been invited. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, admiring the reflection of a man he believed was on the verge of international domination. Vanessa leaned against the bed in silk. "This is your breakthrough," she whispered. "When you come back, everyone will know you're global." He smiled. He never noticed that the invitation email hadn't addressed him as a speaker, just as an honored guest. He didn't ask questions. Men drunk on ego rarely do. Dubai welcomed him with gold light and impossible architecture. The summit venue overlooked the skyline, a glass tower that made Lagos feel small. He stepped out of the black car, adjusting his suit, rehearsing lines in his head. Investors would shake his hand. Deals would be made. His liquidity crisis would disappear. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with power. But something felt strange. People were looking at him, not with admiration, with curiosity, as if they knew something he didn't. He brushed it off until he saw her name, projected in gold letters across the massive LED screen. Keynote speaker, Amara Okafor. Founder and chairwoman, Aurelian Global Holdings. Estimated net worth, $40.2 billion. Daniel stopped walking. The air left his lungs. No, there had to be another Amara Okafor. His Amara didn't even talk about business. His Amara didn't attend industry dinners. His Amara slept in the guest house. The room dimmed. The announcer's voice echoed, "Please welcome one of the most strategic energy investors of the decade." The woman reshaping global infrastructure capital. And then she walked out, calm, graceful, unshaken, wearing a deep emerald gown that commanded silence. The entire room stood. Men Daniel had studied in Forbes profiles were applauding her. She reached the podium and began speaking about offshore wind acquisitions in Europe, about lithium mining partnerships in South America, about sovereign infrastructure bonds in Southeast Asia. Flawlessly, confidently, without notes, Daniel felt something he had never felt before. Small. She didn't look at him, not once. But halfway through the speech, she said something that froze his spine. Sometimes, she began calmly, power is quiet. It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need validation. It simply builds and withdraws. A faint murmur spread across the room. Daniel's mind raced. Withdraws? After the speech, investors surrounded her. CEOs waited to shake her hand. Journalists chased quotes. Daniel stood frozen near the back. Finally, she turned. Their eyes met. No anger, no revenge, just clarity. He approached slowly. Amara, what is this? His voice cracked. She studied him for a moment. This is my work. You never told me. You never asked. The words landed heavier than any insult. They sat in a private lounge upstairs. Daniel's hands were trembling. $40 billion? He whispered. It fluctuates, she replied softly. Markets move. You own Aurelian Global? Yes. The holding company that owns the mansion, she finished calmly. Yes. He leaned back, dizzy. So, when my contracts started failing, she met his eyes directly for the first time. I withdrew strategic backing. The room went silent. You destroyed my business? He snapped. No, she said gently. I stopped protecting it. Daniel realized something horrifying. Every major investor who had ever trusted him had first vetted him through her network. Every bank that approved his early loans had received quiet reassurance. His empire had not been self-made. It had been shielded by the woman he sent to the guest house. Vanessa was posting poolside selfies in the master bedroom. Caption, living soft, earned, not given. Her phone buzzed. A notification from a financial blog. Breaking. Nigerian real estate developer Daniel Okafor attends Dubai Summit, hosted by wife billionaire Amara Okafor. Her smile faded. Wife billionaire? She refreshed. More articles were popping up. Pictures of Amara on stage. Headlines about the silent titan. Net worth breakdowns. Vanessa sat up slowly. This wasn't possible. She was the upgrade. She was the future. She opened Daniel's old emails, digging, and that's when she saw it. Property ownership documents. The mansion registered under Aurelian Global Residential Trust. Sole beneficiary, Amara Okafor. Vanessa suddenly understood the sentence from the guest house. You're living in someone else's home, back in Dubai. Daniel's ego was fighting for survival. Why didn't you tell me? He demanded. Would it have changed how you treated me? She asked quietly. He had no answer. You wanted to feel powerful, she continued. So I let you. The gentleness hurt more than rage. You humiliated me, he said bitterly. No, she replied. You humiliated yourself. She stood. I never wanted control, Daniel. I wanted partnership. And now? She paused. Now I want peace. As Daniel left the summit in shock, his phone rang. Vanessa. Daniel! Her voice was shaky. "Why didn't you tell me your wife is a billionaire?" He closed his eyes. "Because he didn't know." "Pack your things," Vanessa said quickly. "We need to secure the house legally. If she owns it, we could be—" "She owns everything," he whispered. Silence. "What do you mean, everything?" He looked at the Dubai skyline. "I mean, we've been living in her generosity." The line went dead. Daniel flew home not as a conqueror, but as a man unraveling. The headlines were spreading. Investors were calling him, not for deals, for clarification. "Were you aware your wife controls regional energy holdings? Is your company tied to Aurelian Global? Has she divested from your projects?" The liquidity crisis was no longer rumor. It was reality. And this time, there was no shield. When he arrived at the mansion, security stopped him. "Sir, we have updated authorization." "What?" "Access clearance requires Ms. Amara's approval." Daniel felt the world tilt. His own house. He waited outside for 2 hours. When the gates finally opened, it wasn't for him. It was for Amara's motorcade. 3 black SUVs rolled in smoothly. She stepped out, not angry, not triumphant, simply elevated. Vanessa stood frozen in the doorway. Daniel walked toward Amara slowly. "I made a mistake," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," she agreed, and walked past him. Daniel walked through the front gates of the mansion. Or what he had thought was his mansion, and felt the walls close in. The master suite, the pool, even the garden had been reassigned. Vanessa was furious. "This is ridiculous," she yelled. "We pay everything." Amara didn't respond. She merely walked past them, barefoot, serene, every step an assertion of quiet power. The truth hit Daniel like a lightning strike. He didn't control anything. Not the mansion, not the business, not even Vanessa, who now realized she was playing a part in someone else's narrative. Daniel was forced to move back into the guest house. Vanessa sulked in the master suite, trying to reclaim the space. But every attempt to decorate, to assert dominance, or to command staff was met with polite, silent refusals from the household personnel. The mansion, after all, had always belonged to Amara. She owned the contracts, the staff, the land, and the legal rights. Vanessa's power play was meaningless. Daniel felt the walls of his ego crumble. The following week, Amara made an unprecedented move. She invited global media into the mansion. Cameras flashed, journalists buzzed, analysts speculated. "Meet the woman behind Nigeria's largest privately owned energy empire," the headline screamed. Daniel had never been so publicly humiliated, not because of insults or confrontations, but because the world finally saw what he had missed all along. His name, secondary. His role, supportive at best. His mistress, irrelevant. Amara's empire was untouchable. Daniel tried to argue, tried to claim partnership, but she merely smiled. "Partnership is earned, Daniel. You chose ego over patience." Vanessa realized her influence was a lie. The money she had counted on, Daniel's access to investors, had vanished overnight. Staff ignored her commands. Social media backlash mocked her presence. Former business contacts withdrew support. She had underestimated Amara. For the first time, Vanessa understood the sentence Amara had spoken in the guest house. "You're living in someone else's home." Her social media empire could not undo real wealth. Her power could not override legal ownership, and her charm could not overcome strategic genius. Daniel, sitting in the guest house balcony, finally understood. He had been blind, arrogant, self-absorbed. Amara had given him freedom to learn, freedom to fail, freedom to see the consequences of his choices. And for the first time, he felt humility. He called his lawyer, trying to reclaim control. But Amara's legal team was meticulous, airtight, and untouchable. Every asset, every account, every investment, all hers. There was no room for negotiation. One evening, Amara walked into the guest house quietly. Daniel braced for anger, for punishment, for confrontation. She didn't scold. She didn't humiliate. She simply placed a cup of tea on the table. "I could take everything," she said softly, "but I choose not to. You may stay. You may rebuild, but respect the space that is mine and the mistakes you made." Daniel looked at her. Finally, he saw not just a wife, but a force of nature, a strategist, a leader, someone whose silence had masked unimaginable power. And he realized something more. He had been living with a billionaire, a woman he had underestimated, a woman whose patience had taught him the cost of pride. Months passed. Daniel began to understand finance, strategy, and humility in ways he never imagined. Vanessa left, bitter and defeated, her social media influence unable to counter Amara's empire. Daniel worked quietly, slowly, rebuilding a business under Amara's guidance. No more ego, no more assumptions, no more taking for granted the quiet power beside him. He learned that true wealth isn't just money. It's respect, strategy, vision, and sometimes silence. And Amara? She continued to command the world with quiet authority, proving every day that $40 billion can be subtle and devastating. Daniel's master bedroom would never belong to him, but his growth finally might. At a charity gala in Lagos, Amara stood on stage, flawless and commanding. Daniel stood beside her. No master bedroom, no illusions of control, just presence. He had lost his illusions, but gained understanding. The world applauded the silent titan and her reluctant protege. And somewhere in the corner, Vanessa scrolled through headlines, realizing she had truly underestimated the quietest person in the room.